there's anyone out there with 500 Treasure Island in a first edition, they should be really excited and they should really look after it too. Especially if it has its jacket with it. You know, you're looking at a book that is worth at least $8,000. A lot of collectors of children's books, of vintage children's books particularly, which is a huge area to collect in and very interesting. Everything from Beatrix Potter to Enid Blyton to Winnie the Pooh, you know, every child's book that you can name really that's a classic is still collected today very avidly by many tiers of collectors, people who want to read them but people who are also interested in first editions and collecting for the value of them, for actually using books as an investment, because it's actually a really solid investment. First edition books are a really great thing to get into if you actually want to put your money into something that you don't lose on, because there'll never be more of them. They don't publish more old books, obviously, so every year they continue to climb in value, and particularly if you take care of them and you have all the right bits of them together, which is something that is hard to do in children's books. Children's books come in for a lot of punishment compared to any other book. You know, children do dreadful things to books, really. They scribble in them and they colour in them and they write their names on them and they practice things in them and they rip pages out of them and they do all sorts of awful things, not because they don't like books, but actually because they love them and they treasure them and they want to own them and make them their own. But that makes the collecting of them actually quite difficult, because it's hard to find good copies that are really clean and still have dust wrappers that haven't been destroyed and, you know, aren't full of somebody else's mark. So a high-end collector is always looking for a really pristine copy of something. So if they're looking, say, for a first edition of the first book that came out in the Famous Five series, 500 Treasure Island, they're expecting that book to be the correct edition with the correct dust jacket, that dust jacket will be absolutely pristine, not a nibble out of it or a scratch anywhere. There can't be anybody's name in that book, no library stamps, not a mark of any kind. You can't so much as underline something, or the book simply starts to lose its value very rapidly. And in fact, dust jackets is where 2/3 of a book's value will be. If it came originally with a dust wrapper, that's where the value is. And if you don't have the dust wrapper for the book, it will be worth significantly less than half what it would be otherwise.
People will bring in boxes and boxes of really old hardcovers, things that they've grown up with, I suppose, that have been in the family, and they've decided to donate them. And sometimes they can be worth a lot of money, depending on the author, depending on the condition of the book, and the rarity or scarcity of that book, I suppose. Authors like Enid Blyton, always controversial, but also very popular. So we get a lot of those titles in. So often the value of a book, an older book, depends on whether there's been, you know, hundreds of thousands of them published, and then whether they're a first edition or a 21st edition. With the Enid Blyton ones in particular, they were in print for years and years, and there's so many editions of them. To find an actual first in good condition, that could be worth thousands of dollars.
Say I decide that I've got a first edition of 500 Treasure Island, the most valuable book in the series, and I want to sell that to a serious collector, and a serious collector is going to pay between $8,000 and $10,000 for one of those first editions. If I show them the book and I say to them it's a first edition with the dust jacket intact, and it's not, then that is deceitful and that is against the law. Well, the dust jackets, which is where all the value lies, are the first thing to be destroyed, but the dust jackets change as time goes on. And we recently bought a large lot of Blyton books at an auction, and we're really quite surprised to open them all up and find a lot of notes from the former owner about what they had done with the dust jackets. And in this case, he'd taken them off and he'd put them with other editions, because what he wanted to do was to create a complete set of what looked like first editions to sell as a set, which he did do. But in the doing of that, this person has inadvertently mixed up different editions and different dust jackets without realising what they were doing. That they understood that the dust jackets were valuable, but where they've had a book, say, that has the correct jacket with it, but that book has got some kind of damage to it, they've swapped that book for one that's a cleaner copy of that particular story, but they haven't looked to see that it's exactly the same impression as the one that was originally with the jacket. They need to have the same imprint, they need to match, obviously. And, you know, you can see quite clearly how the graphic style changed in how they laid them out. And these end flaps that fold in, they are the best way to tell whether you have the right jackets with the right additions, because that's where all your information is on the jacket. The overall jacket design stays more or less the same for a long time, with the exception of just moving Enid Blyton's name around. So somewhere out there, someone has just bought a lovely set of Famous Fives that they think are first editions, but many of them can't be.